Welcome to New Covenant Ministries International Leadership Roundtable.
Yes.
I'm Tim Heil. I'm here with Tyrone Daniel, who leads NCMI, along with Terry Kreuger, who's on the team with Tyrone. And as we mentioned in the last segment, you'll want to check out Tyrone planted Redemption City Church in Denver, Colorado, and he transitioned that church to TK, which I'm also a part of. I'm on the eldership team there. But be sure to check out the last segment we had on just why transition, why that's important and purposeful. But now we're going to get into what we call the who. Who do you transition to? What do you look for when you transition?
This is gonna be really interesting.
Knowing that you handed the church to him, I think there's a lot of questions about how in the world.
I'm just telling you.
How in the world did you decide to give it to this who? So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Well, as we said in the first segment, we are simply giving you some tools and perhaps some truths around this. We're not telling you how to do this. We'd rather be descriptive than prescriptive. And so how we did this doesn't mean you should do it the same. But there are some points that are kind of for eternity and that we've learned in our 30-something years of transition, where we've done it, as I said earlier, we've done it really well, but we've also done it really bad. And we want to do this better and help everyone in the process. I think the big question on who is probably the biggest question of all. I think you get this wrong, the whole thing's wrong. But let me also say this. There's no guarantees in this kingdom. And I want to say that because it requires response on many levels, not just one. And that's important to know, because I know that transitions have happened even with the right person. Even God has given names of who's to take over. And in the taking over, that person kind of decided to do something else and has bombed out. And I mean, even God himself, who's never made a mistake. If we believe God has made a mistake, then he ceases to be God. But he chose Saul to be king. He didn't ask the people. He chose Saul. He said they wanted a king. So he gave them a king, and he gave them Saul. And actually Saul means chosen by God. So it wasn't man's choice, God's choice. But after a few years, Saul began to mess up with his all the cracks in his character began to show, and ultimately he became no longer the choice of God. And it wasn't God's fault, and it was Saul's fault. It's the way he responded. So I hope we hear that, because I know guys who have handed over in the economy and the will of God, and it hasn't worked out, who are now dead scared and very scared to do anything more. And so I just want to say out there's no guarantees, although God is the guarantee, and he redeems and can and will. Just know that even if you've heard audible voice writing on the wall, it's still not guaranteed. Right. That's not to excuse TK messing things up. So I think that's important though, in anything we do. It's the will of two people, and that's why I think this is so important on the who. I think for us just to understand, this position is not earned, but it's God-given. And that is probably the biggest deal of this, because a lot of us will look to who serves me the best, who honors me the most, who's been there from day one, who deserves it. And actually, there's no deserving in this. I mean, God honors those guys who've served faithfully, and their reward ultimately is in heaven. But you don't reward them with God's inheritance. And so I think we have to understand it's not who's the most this, it's who God has said. And again, if you look at David, for example, being chosen by God, he didn't earn it. He wasn't always there to us, but God picked him. And God says, no, man looks at the outward appearance, but I look at the heart. And so I think for us and for all the transitions that we've been involved in, I say this carefully because everyone says it, but you've got to hear God. Right. And I mean that. If you don't hear God and you just pick by observation, you're in serious trouble. So it's that revelation and observation. And I believe God speaks to you first. Doesn't have to do it like this, but he's done this in our way. He begins to speak to you and give you some ideas and thoughts around who, and then it becomes more and more obvious in observation. Yeah. And if you do get the observation first, you better hear God to confirm it before you just attempt in it. So I think those are important things in any transition, is who does God want? Believe it or not, God seems to know more than us. And he knows what's best, and we might think we know. But actually, it's his thing. Keep him and hearing God. So for us in our transitioning and where we've seen it really go well, I think with TK and I, and also when my dad handed NCMI and that, he heard God. Yeah. I heard God. And so it's in the hearing of God. It's not who deserves it, who earned it, who serves me best. It's not even who is committed to me. I think a lot of guys think, well, and we're going to get into that thing of sonship and all that, but it's not who's more committed to me, it's who's committed to the King, the kingdom, who's committed to fulfilling this mandate, who's committed. It's not about me, it's about Him. We said that in the first segment. So it's looking for who God wants, not who wants. And that can happen in different ways. I mean, the way it happened for us, with TK, for example, using this illustration of handing over to him. I mean, I obviously, and we'll talk about the how later, but in the how was I'm asking guys who speak into my life and this team we partner with to speak in. And they a lot of their guys, the counsel was look outside, look beyond and bring someone in who can help us in the US with the big picture and so on. And that was a good counsel, because I believe that. We counsel the same. But it was in hearing God, I felt God say, actually, I've hidden him. He's here. The ram in the thicket story. He's actually here. So I was like, here, where, you know? And no, I'm like, him, not him. No, but it is that. It's not what I want. What do you choose? I don't choose anything. If He's choosing, I got to hear God and do what He says. So it's in the timings of God, but it's also in the hearing of who. Right. And so our thing was I was looking out there, and I think He should do that. But actually, God said, no, I've actually hidden him for you. He's here. And so we began looking, and I began seeing, and actually, God gave me TK. And then it had to become obvious for others, and even for my wife, because when I mentioned her, and I said, what about it? She had to work this through, and then she began to say, it's TK. And so it wasn't because he suddenly picked up we were and it just became more and more obvious, but we heard long before that, and so we just had to process and work that through. So all that to say, Tim, honestly, without being silly about this, if we don't hear God, it's doomed. Yeah. And if you think it's God, you need confirmation, because this is more than, hey, join our thing. This is carry this on. And if I can just, Tika, you talking to that, then I want to give some points actually of what I think what I looked for, what my dad was looking for, that I think can help us in that. Do you want to just add something before that?
Yeah, I do want to add something, but I want to ask you to pick up on something first, because there was counsel from the translocal team, from the apostolic team. Then you heard God. I just want to make it plain to people that are listening or watching that you did then go back to the apostolic team.
Nah, forget, yeah, of course. No, actually it wasn't counsel only from them first. I began to hear God on it and then spoke to them. They agreed. But absolutely, once I heard God, I went to those guys again and said, hey, this is what I feel. And they all were like, yeah, of course, makes sense. So it wasn't like do my own thing in any way, if that came across. But it was also, it's processing and hearing God at the end of the day. And to be honest, while we all stand before God for everything, you will stand before God for not just your counsel, but your actions in who you hand to. That's why the guy handing over has to hear God with all due respect. But absolutely.
So I just, maybe from my side, I mean, typically for Sandy and I, God has moved us pretty much every 5 years for the last 25 years.
Flip, not here. Why not? Lord.
Even in Los Angeles, we were in two different places we were there for 10 years, but it was two different churches in vastly two different areas of the city, And so, when we had been here about the 5-year mark, and we came in the early days of Redemption City Church, felt again God led us to come and help Ty Nicole to serve Ty Nicole. And right around that 5-year mark, I was asking God again, gee, Lord, is there something else? And to be honest with you, a door opened, and when I prayed about it, I simply heard God say, wait. Now, there was the God speaking to me say, wait, and there was God speaking to Tyrone at the same time, saying, what he was saying to Tyrone.
We didn't know that.
We hadn't spoken about that.
To this day.
I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, and Tom sure wasn't sure that he was hearing God when God said me.
I was questioning my ability to hear God.
But the truth is, and I mean, Ty has reminded us time and time again that Jesus' love language is obedience. And so if there was a disobedience on either one of our sides, if there wasn't the wait for me, I had another huge door open, a guy offering to pay me to move and open a door for me. And it seemed like, gee, that could be such a good thing. But it's the inclining of our ear towards God and saying, God, what is it that you require of me? And God said, wait, that's all. He didn't say, this thing's coming your way, you're going to be the next guy. He simply told me to wait. Yeah. And it was in the waiting that then Ty started to speak about his season is up and looking to transition the church. So I just want to reiterate that point, how important it is for us in this transition to be hearing from God.
Honestly, I think, as I've said recently a lot, is that I think the two greatest enemies for the future of the church when it comes to leadership is our inability to hear God. I'm shocked, and I say this carefully, I'm shocked how many leaders are not hearing God. And it's not an accusation, it's an observation. Actually, we all have the ability, and we all need to be spending more time asking God rather than telling God.
Sure.
And so I think it's one of the biggest challenges. But second is our unwillingness to do what He says.
Yeah.
So it's actually, that selective hearing thing we keep talking about. They do go. So it's not that we haven't only heard God, it's that we're not wanting to do what He said, or it doesn't kind of fit into my strategy, my plan. I wanted Him to take over or them to take over, but now God's given me a different name. So I'm just going to go with what I feel rather than what God says. And I have to say, whoa, not our thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back to even my dad transitioning to me. My dad was anti, he still is, that, monarch. This is a kingdom, it's not a business. Your business is one thing. This is the kingdom of God. You don't hand over to your son, your physical son. And he preached against that. Literally, he was anti in such reaction of what he was seeing. And then God speaks to him and says, this, your son. And he's like, God, I don't want to hand it to my son. I know the pain of this thing. I know what it's going to look like. I know what he's carrying. But at the end of the day, it's not what he wants, it's what God wants. And it's like God works things out. And I didn't want it either, but God spoke to me and so on. So it's the ability to hear God, but also do what God says. So that's the thing that I think is vital for us in any transition. And if you've heard God, it's going to work if everyone moves according to what God says. It's not going to work if you haven't heard God. That's the bottom. You've got no chance. You've got to keep this thing alive. You end up enemies. You end up fighting for stuff, or arm wrestling. But if it's a God thing, people get on board, and actually it's right. Everyone celebrates it. And so if I can just throw out a couple of these things, and if you want to highlight and ask me or challenge on just some of the things that I think we look for, and I get this from my dad, from his teachings and training, some of the stuff in our 30-something years of transition, something to look for. Do they have a similar heart? And that's a big deal. I think where we've seen transition really go wrong is a different heart, different spirit. Seriously, come in with a totally different agenda. And that can happen from a guy within, not just bring in a guy from without. And so you've got it. If God's in it, has they got a similar heart, right? Yeah. As in a heart for the people, a heart for the king, a heart for where we're going. Because if you've got two hearts, it's going to absolutely mess the thing up. So, because we keep saying this, when in any transition in God, we're changing hands, not the heart.
Yeah, very good. Right.
Unless it's to bring something that's in despair and going down and changing it, then we might have to change the heart. But if it's a God-given transition to go to the next level, it's got to be, we don't change the heart of what we're doing, we just change the hands.
Yeah, totally.
Changing hands, not heart. So the heart has to be the same, and I don't think you can always tell the heart. And that's the problem with when even Samuel was enamored by David's brothers because he looked outward, but God says, I look at the inward, the heart. And so I think for me, similar heart is numero uno. Obviously hearing God and then looking. Do we have a similar heart? I mean, look at us. We're very different. We're different in expression. No, that's not meaning we're not the same. We have the same similar heart. And that's what gives me confidence for the future of this church, is that actually we carry His heart together and we're carrying a similar heart.
You both liked Harleys, though, so that helped, right?
That's true. That's true. That's where we connected. It was there that we realized we are one in the Lord, you know.
Can I make a quick comment there?
Yeah, please.
So, it's, it's 14 or 15 years now that you've been leading NCMI? 14 years. So I've served on this translocal team for 20 plus years, and so served under Dudley, and then had the privilege of watching that transition. And I can remember for me in the early days of that transition, looking at Ty and going, okay, I was convinced it was God, but there was still something I wanted to see. And having served on the team for that long, I didn't want Ty to wipe out the past and go, okay, now this is a new thing. Yeah. But I also didn't want him just parroting his dad, if that makes sense. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? And so there was this interesting thing, is I want to see Ty build on the foundation that Dudley laid and we all laid together on the team. But also I wanted to know that God had spoken to him and given him His own fresh revelation and fresh stuff for the translocal team. If the heart's the same, then those two things aren't radically different, if that makes sense. Yeah, and so could you imagine me standing up after Ty, again, with us as elders, has laid foundation, blood, sweat and tears, as he said, and then I get up in front of the church and either verbally or non-verbally, we just write off the last 5 years. What a waste of time.
Yeah.
Now we're getting down to the real business. And I think when the heart is the same, then that is not communicated in any way. Because we're going, man, the heart is here. But also, in the transition, God has to have spoken to the lead guy. God has to have spoken to me about, man, there are some things I want you to build on. As Ty said, it's always for the better. It's always for the more. It's always for the increase. So I want to build on. I'm not wiping out what was. I'm just saying God has now spoken to me about some things to add on to take on the foundation that He's already laid.
Well, and the one thing we haven't mentioned yet is that you still attend the same church that you handed over. So that heart has to be the same, right? It's like if he immediately had a different heart, I think, you might have been finding a new church.
Right, or he might have found another church. But no, that's true. I think, and again, it doesn't mean it's easy, but it means you're in the same spirit, same heart. And honestly, it's building for what he wants, not what I want or he wants. And so, we'll get to that, I think, in the how. But it has been that. And there's no question ever have we got a similar heart. Again, expression, gifting, anointing, very different, and style, but not heart. And that's why I don't have to question. If it was heart, then I'd be like, there's a problem. There's no. So that's a good thing. I think just a thing, can I just get through some more of this list, just some practical, similar value system, which is similar to heart, but different. And again, we've seen the opposite of this at times. And I'm sure some of you have experienced that. Where a guy with a different heart's come in and literally, like you said, can the past, dishonor it at every level. And let me just say, if you get anything here, God will never honor dishonor.
Very good.
It goes against the very nature of who God is. So if you dishonor, don't expect God to honor. But the key to all of this, when we get to the end of this whole segment and all segments, is mutual honor is the key of it all. But if you honor Him and over honor each other, then this thing can't go wrong. So just on that. But guys come in and dishonor, and I'm going to do it better. I'm going to show you in the insecurity of trying to go forward, that eliminate what was. And God can't honor that. He won't. Paul didn't arrive and say, he didn't say to the guys, hey, do away with my foundation. He said, build on my foundation. And that's this thing of building on the. If it's bad foundation, adjust it, but don't get rid of everything. Unless it's something we've had to pick up that's gone nowhere. But I'm talking in good transition, honor, strengthen, and encourage, but go forward and move forward. So it's similar value systems. And they come in with different values. That's got to be picked up in your hearing God and connecting. Do they carry a similar value system? Do we believe the same stuff? Do we carry that? Or are they going to bring something that is totally different to what the foundations of this ministry or church is? Are shepherd-hearted? That's a big deal. Not do they look for ministry, do they care for people? I think for us, most of all, was obviously hearing God, but does TK care about these people? Does he care like I care? It doesn't mean I was available 24, but I cared. When someone left, I grieved. I still grieve. I don't even leave this church. Do they have a heart for the sheep? Not for their ministry, will the sheep buy into what they do? Do they care? Do they love? And you'll know that before they're leading. And one of the things my pops used to teach us is this: if you really want to know how guys are going to treat the church, look how he treats his wife. Totally. Okay, I'll just say. And so if you want to know how's this guy going to treat this church, look how he treats his wife. That's a good picture around that. Shepherd-hearted, a son. And when I say son, please hear me, I don't see TK as my son. He's actually older, believe it or not. Oh, yeah, you believe it.
I know, I look younger than you.
So I'm not saying you're a parent, you're someone under you, someone younger, but son as in they carry the same, it's the same thing of heart and intention. There's a big difference between successors and sons, to be honest. Successors are those guys who come in, I'm going to show you. Sons come in and honor the father, whether you their father or the father of the work. You honor the father, and this mutual honor, which we've said. So I think look for someone who's a son, not physical, and be careful if it's physical son, because that's a whole different dynamic. It doesn't have to be that, but someone who is a son, and there's danger when it's your physical son, right? Yeah, okay, just move on. But also visionary, with vision, and that's the point I want to make that TK highlighted earlier. If you look in history, and we've got to learn from history, majority of transitions, whether it be denominations, organizations, churches, very quickly, and I'm just observation without pointing fingers, the very movement, stream, flow, denomination, church becomes the very thing the founding guy broke away from and intended to build, not to build. It becomes that. And I reckon it's, honestly, this is the reasoning why. Is because we hand over to an administrator rather than a visionary. Now think about that. Majority of ministries, and I'm all for administration, but I don't want to, my job's not to administer what was. when I lead NCMI. Your job is not to, that's what he said, honor the history, but recognize we still got to walk in what's still to come. And so a lot of guys are like so enamored on what was, and they're so administrating and keeping what was, that they're not actually pioneering, taking what is. That's the difference between an administrator and a visionary. And so I think you've got to look, can this person, do they carry vision? Are they visionary? They're not administrating what they've been given, they're taking it on and into its next season, which is a big deal when it comes to any. Why transition if the dude's just going to administrate? You might as well keep going.
Just maintain.
You might as well just carry on. Why? If TK was just going to administrate what I was doing, I might as well carry on doing it. But actually God called him to, if I was going to administrate with my dad, you don't lose it, but you take it on in. And so that's the big danger, I think, also in transitioning, is you hand to someone who's just going to maintain or administrate rather than who's a visionary who carries vision. And you've got to pick that up from them in your conversation without tricking them, but hearing what's in your heart. What do you feel? Or are you just so happy about everything all the time that we're not going to go anywhere? We've got to hear God and be able to. So just, I'm sure you got some comments around big thinker. You want no small thinking. And honestly, I looked at a couple of other guys in this process, and I'm just being honest. Thinking was so small, I walked away from them exhausted every time I hang out with them, just trying to convince them that they should be alive, let alone leading a church. I'm being honest. I just thought, you're going to kill these people. Now, God can adjust that, but I want someone who dreams big. I want to follow people, and I'm hoping I'm that guy who's always thinking big, always thinking beyond. And regardless of what you're handing them, it's got to be someone who can think beyond and think big. Secure. My goodness, they better be secure if they're going to lead what God has. This leadership will show every weakness of your insecurity. Yeah. And if you transition, that's probably even more insecure because people compare you, or they, you know, why you didn't do it, he did like this. So you need someone who's secure in them, in themselves, in their calling, because they can also make it hard for me if I hand to TK, he's insecure. I'm going to have no space in this. Sure. And if I'm insecure, I'm going to always be gripping and grabbing this thing.
Without getting sidetracked on that, I would just say that has to include the wives as well.
Oh, which is more so probably.
I don't want us to go down a whole rabbit.
No, but you can also speak.
But that is a huge part of it. And I think we'll get to it later when we talk about the.
Well, maybe not. Just quickly about a wife.
Well, I think, you know, I mean, tasking is critical, and we are going to talk about that later. You know, I think it's insecurity that causes us to struggle to honor. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because if I'm insecure about my position, so Ty's handed me this thing, and he's this legendary leader, and he leads the apostolic team, and he's handed it to me, and he's sitting there every week. You know what I mean? If I'm insecure about that, it's hard for me to honor him, either publicly or privately when I'm with people. It's hard because he's already this guy, and now I'm making him more look like this guy, which makes me look like less. If you're insecure, that's going to be the result. If you're insecure, you're always going to try and make other people look bad to make yourself look good. But when there's a mutual honor, and I would go so far as to say that with Ty and I, there is a mutual honor, and that definitely carries to our wives. Yeah. You know what I mean? We are mates, but to watch our wives together and that, there's a mutual honor and a mutual respect. You know, we don't struggle to say to each other, "Man, well done, thanks for doing that," whatever it is. You know what I mean? There's a natural flow to it. It's not forced. It's not rigged. There's a natural flow to that. But I just wanted to make the point. I think it does include the wives.
Absolutely, it's a good point.
Because if my wife, we could be best mates, but if our wives are at each other, that's going to make it difficult. Sure.
Yeah, or insecure, because then they're dropping into your ear, my ear, and causing issues. Just quickly, let me get through this. We also make sure they, which again links to this thing, but they're not a reactor, they respond. I tell you what, reacting leaders are very difficult to follow and to lead, to be honest. And so they don't react, they respond. That's a big deal. Look for, we're talking about things you should be looking for. Man of grace and redemption. That's a big deal. Not are they quick to cut people, but do they have grace? I look for, I want to see people redeemed. It's the God's plan. It's how it works. So we want to see, how do they handle? Do they want redemption with people? Do they want to cut them off and get rid of them? Man, people of grace and redemption. Yeah. Be careful if that's your heart and you hand it to someone who doesn't have that heart. You'll see the end quickly.
I'm feeling better and better about myself with this checklist, bro.
No, this list was overlooked for TK. No, I'm kidding. But sacrificial too. Are they paying a price, or they want people to? That's huge. Are they going to keep? Because when you plant the church, we gave our all. Finances, family, we left everything. And everything, we gave everything. There's nothing we didn't hold back. And that's not, wow, look at us. And then the dude waltzes in, and now they're going to all give to him. Are they going to continue to sacrifice as leaders? Example. Can you say to people, follow me as I follow Christ? Are they an example? Not do they speak well, preach well. Actually, are they someone worth following? Right. And that's an example too. Right. Good marriage and family. That's a big deal. We said that. It's not, hey, he's great or his wife's awesome. No, they got a great marriage. Now, it's hard to... what's a great marriage? Well, how long's a piece of string? My marriage is great. So if you, no. But my point is, if they got a bad marriage, that's, as we said earlier, that's how they treat their church. They've got to be strong. Their family's got to be whatever. And runs on the board. They've got to have done something. Now, God doesn't pick the most experience, but to take something on, you've got to have some runs on the board. You don't just bring someone from the outside and put that. Runs on the board, they've got to have done something where you can actually point back and say, hey, actually, yeah, runs on.
I was just making sure they don't think, oh, he's on a board or something.
No board. Definitely not on a board. But track record, they've done something. They're not just good at telling people what to do. So many experts today, but very few have done something. Right. And I'm always looking behind you saying, well, what have you actually done? And I think, again, it's not too checklist, but actually you've got to have some credibility in what you've already done. Yeah. That gives you, I think, credibility. Understanding the culture where you're ministering. That is so huge. So if you're bringing someone from the outside into either the context of the church or the ministry, it's the city, it's the region, it's the nation, they better understand somewhat of the context. And I think even in our global mission to bring guys in, which is right, we better make sure they're understanding the context. And if they're not willing to adjust to the context, they're not the right guy. And so I think that's where we have to process, which we're going to talk about how in a moment, I guess. But my point being is they need to understand the context they're leading and coming into. And you can pick that up and learn that. But if they're not willing and they're going to come in and show you, it's not going to be helpful. Be generous. I mean, generous in all things, everything. Because if they're not generous in all things, they're going to create a church or a leadership or a ministry that is not generous. And so again, I want to see, I'm not trying to be funny, but if I'm looking and who's paying when we go out? Are we going to even offer? Do we even bring money? Or is it just you going to pay because you... Those things, when there's a need, you're the one who's first to, I'll pay for it rather than ask people. Just generous in their time and the talents and the finances and everything. Look for generosity because God honors generosity. He doesn't honor holding on. Under authority. If they're not under authority, then they don't understand authority. So are they willing, even if they're going to be the visionary guy, are they under authority? Do they know how to operate under authority? I look for that team player. My goodness, friends, even if they're not taking over a team, just a local church, they better know how to play team, especially if they're going to lead a team. So team player, they've got to have some understanding of the history of what they're taking over so that they can honor the past and not just write it off. They've got to be humble, humility. I mean, if they come in arrogance, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Humility, connect well with the sheep, have capacity, and so on. So, what comments around that? Anything? Or any questions? Or?
No, I think it's good, you know, and I think again to Ty's point, it's not simply a checklist. You know what I mean? There are some incredibly helpful things on there, and I joked about saying, gee, I'm feeling better about myself knowing that that's the checklist that I made. But actually, that's a tool. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's a tool that works in the context of hearing God.
Yeah. It's the observation from the revelation.
And knowing what God's called us to.
Yeah, but they're important things to look at rather than just, hey, God said. Well, these are some observations that God said. And these are the reasons you can present it to people with conviction because you've seen this. And if, as a team that you partner with in the how, these are the things the team should be able to pick up in the guy who's taken over. Rather than it just heard God. Well, we haven't heard God. So what do we do now? Well, these are some things to begin to say. Well, how do they connect? How's their marriage? And again, it's not a checklist. And none of us live this checklist. When I heard my dad say this about the next team leader, I thought not even Jesus, with all due respect, could lead this team. And again, I say that carefully because Jesus is perfect. I know that. But I do think it's not something to aspire for, acquire for. It's just some helpful tools in transitioning of who the next person could be and what that could look like.
So I'm nervous to make a comment about humility.
Make it.
Because it's like, you know, the old story about this guy was so humble, they gave him a humble badge, and then the next Sunday he wore it, so they had to take it away from him.
It was like Moses writing about himself as the humblest man in the world.
But I do want to say this again by observation, and so it's not a comment about me; it's a comment about others, about other things that we've observed. In times of transition, I think the guy that's handing over has to be very aware of that thing as opposed to ambition. Yeah. And I've seen that happen personally. Been in very close proximity to that, where the guy taking over was very ambitious, and I tell you what, that thing will result very quickly in the guy that handed over to being sidelined. It's just there's that ambition, there's that reaching, there's that grasping for it, and in a sense that goes contrary to a lot of the other things that we've said about being open-handed and open-hearted and similar heart and all of those things. So I think that is that. I can just say from my side, once Tyrone had told us, because there was probably about let's say a 2 or 3 month period from when you told us God had spoken on the eldership, from when you told us God had spoken to us, spoken to you about season for transition and had asked us to pray, and I can honestly say this, and again, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I never prayed one time, God give me this church, and I don't believe I ever did any. You can comment on this. Every time he called me, hey, let's have a coffee, let's go for a ride, I would tease him and say, are we going for a ride, or is this a job interview? You know what I'm saying? But it was that thing of kind of like taking that tension out. But I can say this, my simple prayer in that time of transition was a prayer that I've prayed for myself in the last 25 years of full-time ministry, and it's David's prayer. He led the people with clean hands and a pure heart. That's been my prayer for 25 years. Lord, help me to lead these people with clean hands and a pure heart. And in the transition, that was my prayer. God, help me to continue to lead these people with clean hands and a pure heart. So I think that humility is a big.
Yeah, it is. Both sides there.
Good stuff. Well, thank you both for sharing your heart behind the who, and thank you for watching and or listening in to segment 2. Be sure to check out the first segment on why transition, and then join us for the next segment where we talk about the how, and that will be really interesting. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon.